privilege to have Rabbi Kish, who's here with us, who will be speaking first, and Rabbi Eli, who will be speaking afterwards. Rabbi Kish will be speaking about the Igbo and their struggle against anti-Semitism, and Rabbi Brackman will be speaking about Tish B'Av, sort of finding meaning in the history of expulsion and exclusion. In a way, you know, as Bob Dylan said, I'm quoting him this week, he said, you know, we live in a world of lies. And, you know, it's sort of a Kabbalistic view of things. And I think the study and dealing with issues of anti-Semitism, it's really the world of lies. And today, we're going to deal with things from a Jewish worldview. Not from the perception of dealing with hate and misinformation and demonization and misrepresentation and violence and normalization and all the important things we deal with, but really from a Jewish lens. And what I mean, we spoke yesterday about the Mizrahi Sephardic experience and how it's not really understood and appreciated. We've spoken about how, particularly in the United States, Jews have been racialized again by our enemies. I think what we're going to experience today with Rabbi Kish is really understanding the profound... Mr. Marcus? Okay. And if you think about the destruction of the temple and how the Jews scattered, I said this the other day, if we're all sitting in Jerusalem and the Europeans are coming, the Romans are coming, and they're coming to destroy the temple, destroy the Jewish people, and annihilate us, and everybody's sitting around saying, like, where'd we go? Some will say, well, let's go east. Some will say, let's go northeast. Some will say, let's go south. And I'm sitting there saying, hey, let's go to Rome. Let's go to Europe. You think, you know, that's not the right direction to go. So we were scattered and we were disconnected for many, many centuries. And now in the age of globalization and telecommunications and the internet, we're able to communicate. And I'll say that I had the profound experience of spending Pesach with Rabbi Kish in his synagogue in Lagos and his community. And I'm very familiar with Ethiopian Jewry and world Jewry, and I have to say it blew my mind. And I also had the good fortune of going to Ghana and meeting indigenous Jewish people there. It's extraordinary. And I think we're in a moment in history where we're coming together for the first time in millennium. And you can mark my words, in the next generation, the demographic consistency, nature, composition of the Jewish people is going to be revolutionized. We are uncovering the depth of our culture and our civilization around the world, and it's going to be a revolution, and an extraordinary revolution of people coming together. To my right is the wise man of Oxford, a scholar, a leader of the Jewish community, and from a Jewish perspective, I'll just say, there's 4 exiles. There's Egypt and slavery, there's the Babylonians, which is a physical annihilation, it's the Greeks that were assimilation, and Edom, Rome, Europe, has the depth, the deepest exile ever that incorporated slavery, genocide, and assimilation. And to some extent, we're still in this exile. And Tish B'Av represents our understanding of this history of exile and this experience, and as we're perhaps on the cusp of redemption, of returning to Israel, and the ingathering of the exiles are being unveiled. And I think these 2 lectures are actually quite profound at a metaphysical level. So we have 2 great thinkers and leaders of the Jewish people with us. It's really an honor. So Rabbi Kish, the floor is yours.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. And let me say, Kish, Onyia. I am the founder and Rosh of Adat Israel Jewish community in Lagos. Lagos is a commercial capital of Nigeria, most people know it. And incidentally, I am the president of the Igbo Jewish communities of Nigeria. So as I'm speaking here, I'm wearing 2 or 3 hats. Whatever I achieve here, whatever I say here, I say for all the Igbo Jews in Nigeria. So today I'm going to talk about the Igbos and their struggle against anti-Semitism. One of the reasons, first of all, you will know if a people are Hebrew or Jews, do they have enemies? If they don't have enemies, and they are saying they are Jewish or they are Hebrew, think it twice. But wherever you see Jews, the first litmus test is who are their enemies? And they say, oh, those people. You say, okay. Then why are they their enemies? What makes them enemies? Then you start seeing the all familiar tropes. It might come in different shapes, but X-ray it, they will be the same thing. So Igbos also have their struggles with the same of two familiar enemies every Hebrew or Jew have around the world. Okay, but I intend to open it like this, like a rhetorical question. Now I say, could the anti-Semitic tendencies of the Western civilization and its Eurocentricity influenced almost the non-acknowledgement stroke recognition of my people who are descendants of the dispersed tribes of ancient Israelites in the sub-Saharan Africa by the Jewish world? Could it? Why is this so? Eurocentricity, Europeans first before any other person. Just like recently, the American president said, America first. So that you first, and most of the Jews live in Europe, has it also made you also to think you don't look elsewhere to know if actually my people exist elsewhere or not? So that is my opening stuff. It's a thought for everybody. Did the European sojourning affect you that much? Okay. This seemingly neglect cum non-acknowledgement has likely reinforced the ill treatment of Igbos or perceived Jewish people by the government of those places. These descendants of the dispersed tribes of ancient Israelites found themselves. In this case, Nigeria. In June of 2021, it was shocking to the world jury when the news of arrest and detention in a prison dungeon, a well-known Israel advocate and activist, his name is Brackman, for 3 weeks extrajudicially by the Department of Nigerian Secret Service, DSSS, while on a trip for a documentary on the lives of the descendants of the dispersed tribes of ancient Israelites, whose news reached him that dwell in Igbo land, southeastern Nigeria. He was arrested and locked up for 3 weeks because they saw him Jewish. He's not the only Jewish or Israelite person in Nigeria because they saw him as. If you come to Nigeria and you're just walking, nobody, but once they perceive you're Jewish, you become an enemy. But you can go anywhere as you are, even if you say you're Israelite, but once you say Jewish, so he came in as Jewish. And the next thing, they arrested him. They put him not just in prison, a dungeon, underground prison for 3 weeks. Some people had the story, people have asked me about it here. The news was much of a disconnect to the majority of the Jewish world. For many, the entire situation didn't make much sense. Jews in Nigeria? Why did a prominent figure in the Israel advocacy movement care enough to go there? Why would the Nigerian government care enough to arrest such a person? These are the questions we should be asking. Having lived my life majorly in Igbo, Igbo is called like Igbo. it is a corrupt form of Hebrew. It's our neighbors that address us as Igbo. It's Igbo. So that's how they address us. So it's a corrupt form of Hebrew. Live my major life of my life in Igbo hinterland of Nigeria, participating in the practice of the culture and traditions of my people called Omenana, which is a replica of the practices done during the First Temple period prior to the time of Ezra the prophet and the men of Great Assembly. It continues to astound me how little most Jews, both in Israel and abroad, know about the millions of men, women, and children in my corner of West Africa who identify as the descendants of the dispersed tribes of ancient Israel, no less than they, the modern world Jewry, do identify. Millions of my people suffered not only a genocide inspired by anti-Semitic tropes, but also struggle to this very day against a government willing to regularly raid synagogues and they abuse anything openly Jewish. People have been praying in the middle of Shimone Israel, the police come to arrest you. Army come to take you away. They bulldoze your synagogue. If you don't come out, the bulldozer takes you and the synagogue. The majority of Jews are woefully ignorant of even existence of Igbos, not to mention their Israelite identity. The reverse is not true for the Igbos. So the natural question is, why is it so? The main cause for this asymmetric recognition is the same reason Boko Haram can run amok, slaughtering people on video footages without the international news reporting it. Yet when around a dozen Palestinian Arab tenants of homes in Sheikh Jarrah in east of Jerusalem are subject to being evicted, the whole world has something to say about it. Looking at the unholy matrimony of Eurocentrism and anti-Semitism, since the Western colonial powers first conquered much of the globe, the proverbial ball was in the West court. European society and biases, both expressly and implicitly, throughout centuries of both physical, cultural, and educational colonialism, continue to dictate for many of us which lives matter, and as well as when their oppression matters. As a result, one of the few times when non-Europeans get included in this coveted list is when they are the supposed victims of Europe's favorite whipping child of millennia, the Jews. The only reason why Palestinians get featured in this list of who matters is because they are victims of Jews. If any other person in the Arab world do anything that is not Jew, you won't hear it. Just like a few days ago, the Syrian government was killing the Jews. It was not much of the news we had was that the Israeli government are killing Palestinians, but they didn't talk the story because it was the new leader of Syria was killing the Jews. It's not a news, but the news was when the Israeli government decided to save the Jews, it became a news. So Europe, if it is not a victim of the Jews, it doesn't matter. Could it be that Western civilization, Eurocentric and anti-Semitism bias has blinded the Jewish world to the existence of an entire community of their own people? that Hebrew and Judean ancestors sojourned throughout the world is a prominent feature of Jewish education. It is well known and not at all controversial to most Jews that Judean former slaves and refugees traversed most of Europe, the Americas, and much of Asia. Yet somehow, this history and corresponding popular narrative for most Jews only include Jewry in the northern extremity of African continent. The southern rim of the Mediterranean basin, just like we had the Jewish history yesterday, if you check the history, only maintained the extremity of northern African continent, as though there was a barricade, Trump barricade, between the North Africa and the rest, that no Jew should escape to this side. They all stopped in the Mediterranean. It can only happen if there is an artificial barricade, but in North Africa, human behavior, you can't predict it. But each time we say this story, this history, it looks like there's a barricade that makes sure that people don't leave that Mediterranean basin and go elsewhere in Africa. But human behavior doesn't predict such. So, but why do we maintain that history and that education and that narrative? Yet somehow this history and corresponding popular narrative for most Jews only include Jewry in the northern extremity of African continent, the southern rim of the Mediterranean basin, if not for the intense advocacy and outcry of motivated activists and rabbinical leadership, the existence and rights of Beta Israel, Ethiopian Jewry, would have remained an interesting afterthought in the minds of a minority of Jews rather than an integral part of reality in the Jewish state. Today, around 160,000 Beta Israel live in Israel, and an estimated equal number of Jews belonging to an emerging community of those forcibly converted to Christianity remain in Ethiopia. Might be more, just thereabout. For some, the return of Beta Israel, Ethiopian Jewry, to Zion was a wake-up call to the possibility of other diasporic communities in Africa beyond the somewhat familiar northern region of the African continent. It also caused many scholars to reassess prior assumptions regarding the historic fate of the northern tribes of Israel who were partially exiled in the year 722 BC by the Assyrian Empire. My people, you see, the exile of the Jews didn't occur once. You can count about 3, 4, 5 waves. The first wave, when the children of Israel were leaving Mizraim, the Gemara says 1/5 left Egypt to Moshe. What is 1/5? 20%. And what happened to the 4/5? What happened to the 80%? And from what we know from Torah, around 600,000 men, not counting their wives, left. If I want to count their wives, average Jew of old have 10 children. So if there are 600,000 men, then I would say about 6 million people. And if 6 million people is 20%, what will be 80%? You see? So 6 times 8 is about 24 million, something like that. 24 million people, as time of Mizraim, left in Africa. So do the population projectile, so you know how many people left in Africa. And we're looking for Gila when you have not found your brothers. And we'll keep wondering, why is the Messiah not coming? This is the first wave, the very elementary wave. Now, they left and went to Israel. In Israel, you know, the king called Sennacherib. Sennacherib came took some people in Israel, took them away. Where they took them, nobody knows. And brought people who don't know Torah, who don't know anything, put in Israel, and Hashem was angry, and the wild animals and so on was killing people. They told him, go and meet the priest. And when the priest said, okay, they went and brought some priests back and mixed the priest with the people in Israel. And they said, so he didn't remove those people he brought into Israel up to today. The people he took away, he didn't bring back up to today. Second phase. Now, the third phase, the 10 tribes. But each time we say the 10 tribes, we forget that there are 2 phases, even before the 10 tribes. We took the 10 tribes in the year 722, by the 722 BC, by the Assyrian Empire. Where did he take them to? They said they went beyond the rivers of Kish. Is it not? Where is Kish? Kish is Africa. Kish is not Europe. Kish is not America. Kish is not Asia. Kish is Africa. Now, the Beta Israel we're talking about here, we all say it's Ethiopia. Is it not what we say is Ethiopia, is it? But I will bust your bubble. The Ethiopia of the Torah time is not the Ethiopia of today. Look at this place. Do you know this ancient map of Africa shows the vast area formerly known as Ethiopia as opposed to the East African country called Ethiopia today. Modern Ethiopia was known as Abyssinia, and ancient Ethiopia was the rest of Black Africa. If you look here, you see Sudan, Nigeria is around here. This is Lower Ethiopia. Central African Republic is Upper Ethiopia. The way you call Ethiopia is Abyssinia. This Abyssinia is about 500 years ago, but the name around here is Kuma Empire, Kuma people. That's what they call it. So this Ethiopia we're looking at, okay, our people have come back from Ethiopia. Did you really get it? This thing is about 1st century map. Look at the whole West Africa is Lower Ethiopia. Look here, Upper Ethiopia. I've put another one for you. This was a later one. They still call all this whole place Ethiopia, unexplored region. And the other place they call Ethiopia today is around there. And we're looking for Geulah. When you don't know where your people are. Queen of Sheba didn't come from here. Didn't come from Abyssinia. Queen of Sheba came from here. In this place, there's another place called Sheba here. Shin Vet Head here. If we read deeply in Gemara, here, there's Sheba here, not here. This one, there were modern day Sheba, but there's Sheba here. Go and check it. This is where Queen of Sheba came from, not here. According to Jewish oral tradition, an African diaspora was not only possible but likely. Not only did many Jewish leaders in the rest of the diaspora suspect their general location in the interior of Africa, but they were concerned with their well-being. This is attested by letter. The letter I had it, but I couldn't find it. When the explorers of the Niger Basin were coming to Africa, the chief Ashkenazic rabbi of Britain, go check it, wrote a letter to the people coming to explore my place that please, our brothers are there. If you get there, give them this letter that will care about their well-being. That letter was written by the chief Ashkenazic rabbi of Britain. Go check it. I had it, but where I had it in WhatsApp, the normal disappearing time just went off the first day. So I couldn't find it, but I can still find it. So they wrote a letter to us, knowing that we are there. But did the letter get to me, to my ancestors? No, because the explorers of my place, their aim wasn't to find the lost people of Israel, but to exploit them. So when they give us the letter, it will embolden us to fight them. Because my people, why the British doesn't like the Igbos is it took Britain 36 years to conquer the Igbos. But it took them 6 months to conquer the Hausa, 6 months to conquer the Yorubas, but it took them 36 years to conquer the Igbos. Why? Because the Igbos are Republican in nature. Igbos have a dictum that every human being is equal. We don't have king in Igbo land. The same way Israel don't have king. When Israel asked king of Hashem, Hashem was angry with them. So when we came to where we are, we don't have king. We are ruled by elders and the king priest, like the Kohen Gadol. So because there is no arrow point man, it was difficult for the Britain to find who they can swindle or tell anything. When you tell one man, he said, no, this has to hear it. That one has to hear it. Before you know, there are 4 people you need to talk to. And who do you tell, who do you want to bribe or confuse? So even each community is independent of the other community. So if you convince that community, you have not convinced the other community. Just like the way the 12 sons of Israel, that you convince Zebulun does not mean that Asher will follow you. So you still have to go and do the same work 12 times over again. That is how we were. It took them 36 years. So the Britain didn't like it. Which were meant to arrive on the banks of the river Niger, placed in the hands of British colonialists. It is unknown whether these letters ever reached the desired destination. However, we do know that one particular tribe had long ago settled in these banks of the river Niger, the Igbos. Harshly detested by other tribes in the region, and their alleged peculiarity, British explorers and anthropologists immediately highlighted key dissimilarities that made the Igbo unique among all the tribes that had come across in the region. They had come across in the region. A commitment to an oral code of law and customs uncannily similar to those described in the Torah. This commitment similarly was well documented by contemporary anthropologists, which motivated the British colonialists to amplify their missionary efforts on my people. Because they have seen these people, because wherever you see Jews who practice Torah, to dominate them is difficult. So seeing that we have this oral law, they know they can't dominate us. The only way they can dominate us is to force us into Christianity. With the consequence that only a tiny minority of the Igbo were able to preserve their pre-colonial culture, a culture the Igbos identified as Israelite in origin. That Israelite in origin, this is my synagogue. This is to show that we'll still do it. This is me and my 2 sons during their bar mitzvah. This is my first son. The first time he started Tefillin, that is me, and that is it. So that is my second son also. This was in 2019. This is in 2022. So that we still practice this till date. Five minutes? Okay. All right. In the same manner in which it is difficult to pinpoint precisely the date and details surrounding the arrival of Israelites to Ethiopia and India, it is likely difficult to know with certainty when and why the first Hebrews migrated to this part of the world. Yet, from what we understand regarding the oral tradition of the Igbos, the antiquity of their arrival suggests an early departure from the Hebrew homeland. So now, this one shows kind of how we moved. Like yesterday we were talking that, coming from Israel from this side, they got to here where they have the Moors. You see, between Morocco and Songhai is very close, and this is where our people moved to. We have about 5 kingdoms of West Africa. We have Ghana, Mali, Songhai before it came to Benin. So here was where and if you look at this Songhai, the next map shows you this is Songhai. There's a River Niger, from Songhai down to Igbo land. That is how we migrated. Just like people here are talking about Ethiopia, this Ghana you see here today is not the same Ghana you see in West Africa. The Ghana you see in West Africa is what they call Ashanti in those days. But the real Ghana is here around Mali, Timbuktu area. The majority of Jews in the world today are Jews in the sense that their Judean heritage is central to their inheritance of their Israelite identity. For the Igbo, prior to our modern rabbinical revival, the bulk of our identity was shaped by our Hebrew pre-Babylonian exile identity and culture. While the details of Igbo culture and society are beyond the scope of this article, they share similar practices to other contemporary Israelite communities that developed independently from post-Babylonian Judean experience, like the Bnei Israel of India, the Beta Israel of Ethiopia, and the Samaritans of Israel. In this vein, it is quite possible that the Igbos Hebrew absorbed some Jewish refugees, the later exiles as well from Songhai Empire in 1492. Remember when the Inquisition in 1492, they also, the Songhai Empire also removed the Jews. So some of them moved down the River Niger, down to Igbo land, and they were absorbed. Notwithstanding the arguable blurriness regarding our historical development and the nature of our Hebraic origins, the tragedy of our exile is clear as day. With the founding of Nigeria in 1960, the Igbos were forced to integrate into a state whose borders were drawn by the British without consideration for ethno-religious identity, sandwiched between the governing Hausa Fulani and the Yoruba masses. And despite the bigotry we face, the Igbo minority, comparing with the number of other tribes, together quickly rose to success. This forced the Igbo into an all too familiar cycle of anti-Semitic tropes, followed by the same genocidal violence and expulsion that the Jewish people have faced in every country they sojourn. The Igbos are more or less the type of people whose desire is, I'm quoting the former premier of northern Nigeria. This is what he said. He said, the Igbos are more or less a type of people whose desire is to mainly dominate everybody. If they go to a village, a town, they want to monopolize everything in that village. If you put them in a labor camp as laborers, within a year, they will try to emerge as the headman of the camp. This is Sir Ahmadu Bello, Islamist and anti-Zionist former premier of Nigeria Northern Region. 6 years after the founding of Nigeria in 1966, tens of thousands of Igbos were butchered in pogroms, and millions of Igbos were forced to flee from the northern Nigeria and seek shelter in the southeast of the country. A year later, in 1967, they declared independence as a state of Biafra, an attempt at liberation, which sadly resulted in 3 years of starvation, bombing, and mass murder. This Biafran war is a mystery to the world. It is only Biafra that communist government and capitalist government have marched together to fight in one side. During Biafra War, Russia supplied planes to the Nigerian government. Britain government supplied technical assistance for the flying of the plane. America provided intelligence against us. There is no war anywhere, go and study it anywhere in the whole world, that communism and capitalism fought on one side. Even if you are right or wrong, they don't fight on one side, but they fought on one side against me and my people. Why is this so? Go and check it. Even in Israel today, they don't fight on one side. Russia doesn't fight on one side with America. They can abstain. Some estimated that 3 million and a half Igbos were murdered. 3.5, but we know this is a government estimate, but we know about 5 million died. You can't hear it anywhere in the news. 100,000 died in Kigali. They say it every day, but my people died 5 million. They said 3.5 million. You can't even hear it. This is the photo of the starving children of Biafra and everybody. I just had to put them here. Some are gory images that I can't just put up. 55 years have passed since Igbo were forced to reintegrate with Nigeria, made to start again. After losing everything, political independence lost, the Igbo spirit has only grown stronger. During the Biafran genocide, Dr. Henry Kissinger, the then American Secretary of State, wrote a memo to Nixon, because Nixon needed to know who are these people so that he would know what they should do, to do relief or not. I'll show you the memo. It's a secret memo Kissinger wrote to Nixon, but it has been declassified. That's why I have it. This is the memo they wrote. This was written Tuesday, January 1969. Look at what Kissinger told Nixon. Say, look at what he said here. Can look from here. Say the Igbos are the wandering Jews of West Africa. This is secret memo. Look at the secret memo, American government. 1969. The Igbos are the wandering Jews of West Africa. Gifted, aggressive, westernized, and a bit envied and resented by mostly despised by their neighbors. This is what they wrote, the American government. They know who the Igbos are. But did they tell anybody? It's a secret document. So we are not saying who are the Igbos. The American government know already. My time is up. Okay. So, but I think I've said majority of the other things are just embellishment. But the Igbos today, they still do all they are supposed to do. The next picture is the people in my synagogue during our Hatan Bereshit, Hatan Torah some year, this is from the archive. These same people do all these things. But yet nobody knows or hears about it. But when some people are told to be evicted from Eastern Jerusalem, the whole world hears it because it is Jews who are saying it. But when they know there are Jews there, they don't want you to know. Why am I saying this? You have millions of your people in Africa. Whatever fight Israel is fighting with Arab is a distraction. Hear it from me. It's a distraction. What Israel should be looking for is for policy of deterrence. What will deter Arabs from Israel is when you find out the millions of your brother and enable them. The fear of the leftists or whatever you call them in Israel is that if you find these Africans, they will come to this small strip of land we have and the economy will collapse. You are wrong. You are being selfish. Hashem enabled you to be there so that you find out these 10 tribes, all these people in Africa, and enable them wherever they are. They have mineral resources. They have everything for you to use your expertise and intelligence to enable them to be economies, and Israel will have Commonwealth of Israel. And when you have such, this war you fight with Arab every 2, 3, 4 years, Arab will be deterred knowing that people who are as aggressive as they are in Africa can come. And they don't have anything they can't answer them. So I want my brothers Israel to zoom out a bit and see the bigger picture. You are too zoomed inside. After fighting this war with Iran, watch next 2 years, another thing will happen. You go and throw bombs somewhere again. And then you say, I'm winning. Next 2 years, you throw bomb again. The next time, the Rabbonim will tell you, Geulah, how will Geulah come? When Shekinah is not with you. Shekinah cannot be with you when you don't have the 12 sons of Yaakov with you. You only have 2.5, if I may say. So how can Shekinah be with you? So for Shekinah to be with you, you have to seek out where your brothers are. That is what you have been destined to do. What you are doing is a distraction created by Vatican for you. It is the Vatican who created Islam. I'm telling you, that's my opinion, but go look it. The first wife of Muhammad was Khadija, Roman Catholic nun. They sponsored him. They know they cannot fight the Jews. The only people who can fight the Jews are their cousins, who are the Arabs. And why did the Catholics do that? The Catholics stole the philosophy of the Jews. What is the philosophy of the Jews? That all man is equal, that freedom is for all man, that God is one. Now, knowing that the empires are collapsing, they cannot keep ruling the world, the only thing that rules the world, according to Karl Marx, is religion is the opium of the masses. So the only thing that they can do is to steal the philosophy of the Jews and embellish it with their idolatry and sold it to the world as Christianity and their freedom. And the whole world jumped upon the wagon and they're waiting for Messiah who was not going to come in their aspect. So if you know quickly that your stuff is stolen, you go for it. So they kept you busy with fighting the Arabs every day. So you won't look at the right direction. Thank you very much.
So Eli, Rabbi Brackman, and then we'll have to wait for a few minutes.
Thank you, Rabbi Kish. So, thank you for this opportunity to address you at this important conference. We've had the pleasure of hosting ISGAP over many years. Since its inception, must be 5, 6, I mean, when it began doing the summer schools here, 11 years, time flies. So it's really a great pleasure to welcome you here on behalf of the Jewish community and to allow me to address you in light of the upcoming important day in the Jewish calendar, Tisha B'Av. So 2 astronauts to land on Mars, their mission to check whether there's oxygen on the planet. Give me the box of matches, says one. Either it burns and there's oxygen or nothing happens. He takes the box and is ready to strike a match when out of the blue, a little green Martian appears, waving all his arms and yelling, "No, no, don't." The 2 guys look at each other, worried. Could there be unknown explosive gas on Mars we don't know about? Still, he takes another match. And a crowd of hysterical green Martians coming to them, all waving their arms. "No, no, don't do that, don't do that." One of the astronauts says, "This looks very serious. What are they afraid of?" Nevertheless, we're here for science, to learn if man can breathe on Mars. So he strikes a match, which flames up, burns down, and nothing happens. So he turns to the Martians and asks, "Why did you want to prevent us from lighting a match, striking a match?" The leader of the Martians answers, "It's Shabbat." So we have Shabbat pending coming this evening, and we're also afraid, but also we connect with our tradition. And in that light, we'd like to present the following talk. As a rabbi in Oxford since 2001, I tried to interweave it with the history of anti-Semitism in Oxford which anything happens in Oxford is immediately world headlines, motions passed the Oxford Union, or anything else that happens is magnified. One of the oldest hatreds in the world is what Wilhelm Marx, the founder of the League of Anti-Semites in Germany, called anti-Semitism. This has taken on many forms, including anti-Judaism in ancient times and the Middle Ages, scientific anti-Semitism in the form of racism in the 19th century, until today, in its latest form or mutation, as Jonathan Sachs, Lord Sachs, will say, anti-Zionism, what Jonathan Sachs calls the new anti-Semitism. In this brief talk, we'll present a survey of anti-Semitism in Oxford, followed by delving into the question posed in the title of this talk, how to find meaning in a history of anti-Semitism, persecution, and exclusion. Anti-Semitism and exclusion and its relation to Tisha B'Av, marking the destruction of 2 temples in Jerusalem in 586 BCE and 70 AD, which is closer to home. The edict of the expulsion of the Jews from England in 1290. Allow me to do a brief survey of the history, 3 stages, one can say, of anti-Semitism through the lens of this city and the university, the oldest university in the English-speaking world. We don't know of Jews in England during Roman times, but Jews were invited to settle in England from rural northern France in 1066 with the Norman conquest. The period came to an abrupt end in 1290 with the edict of expulsion by Edward I. During this time, Jews had no rights, were subject to a blood libel in Norwich in 1144, massacre in London in 1189, New York in 1190, excluded from Magna Carta in 1215, forced to wear badges in the form of tablets 1222, after being forbidden from lending an interest in 1275, decimating the community, the coin clipping allegations in 1279, the expulsion followed in 1290. Oxford has had its own cases of anti-Semitism and tragedy. A deacon who converted to Judaism to marry a Jewess was burnt alive outside the gate of Onyia Abbey in 1222. The first known case of such punishment for heresy. A Jewish child who was condemned for having mocked the healing powers of St. Frieswide, which is on St. Giles, in 1189 was found hanging the same day or night, according to a different tradition of this event, in the cellar of his family home. Furthermore, the cemetery was seized by royal decree. The Jewish cemetery that opened in 1177 was seized by royal decree through the local sheriff for the building of a hospital in 1231, after it had been purchased by the Jewry for burial in 1177. In 1266, a cross was erected outside the synagogue and then moved to the place of the funeral procession. Despite the various histories of the University of Oxford, the expulsion of Jews from the city, which took place while the university was still present here, it doesn't even gain a mention in the history of the university, despite the over 1,000-page book on the history. Moving to the 17th century, Isaac Casaubon, a French Huguenot scholar, befriended Jacob Barnett, a Jewish person known as Jacob the Jew, in Oxford around 1609. Casaubon, impressed by Barnett's knowledge of Hebrew, hired him as a tutor and later as a personal secretary. Barnett faced pressure to convert to Christianity, and the university planned a grand ceremony for his conversion. But he ultimately fled Oxford. He was arrested, imprisoned at the Baccardo prison, where he was tormented by fellows of the university through the summer for having decided not to convert to Christianity, and later had to flee, went back to Germany. Baccardo prison is exactly on the site of where the Saxon Tower is on Cornmarket. In the turn of the 20th century, the minutes of the Waynflete Society of 1899-1900 records a paper delivered with its solutions to the problem of poverty-stricken Jewish refugees arriving in England from Europe. The bursar and fellow of the college, Magdalen College, Reverend C.R. Carter, proposed extermination or intermarriage to solve the problem, while Hubert Maitland Turnbull, passed away in 1900, thought Jews have not grit, no real pluck, he writes, written in the annals of this society in Oxford. A Mr. Smith suggested a European coalition should be formed to cart them off to Palestine. A more positive note was struck by Mr. Treherne, possibly a guest, at this society meeting in Magdalen College who spoke up for the immigrant as deserving charity. A further entry in the history of Magdalen College also discusses the resistance against appointing Jewish fellows at the college. In a private letter of June 1948, Bruce McFarlane expressed surprise but no misgiving that 4 conscientious objectors, not to mention an Arab, a German, and a German Jew, had been elected to fellowships that year in the college. He writes, "The college is becoming almost excessively unorthodox. We only need a Chinese and an Indian to complete the transformation." Incidences of anti-Semitism have been related to opposition to the hiring of Jewish fellows to colleges in the 1930s, including the appointment of Albert Einstein, Christchurch, Quantum Marcus Roberts, our friend over here, Isaiah Berlin suffered from anti-Semitism in this regard, and Hans Krebs' admission into his common room was objected. During the Second World War, a wave of anti-Semitism swept through the city of Oxford. We're told, published in a book, The Jews of Oxford, by the local community before and during the Second World War. In light of the increase in size of the Jewish community in the city, anti-Semitism in Oxford took the form of a negative attitude towards Jewish refugees who fled from London to escape the bombing. The Jewish population of Oxford had risen noticeably during the Second World War as a result of the evacuation of Jewish mothers, children, blind persons, hospital patients, and others from London, reflecting the growth. Instead of approximately 30 families before the war living in Oxford, over 200 people attended synagogue at Yom Kippur in 1939. In the same year, it was believed there were some 200 London children in Oxford, and more in the surrounding districts. During this time, numerous organizations were founded and flourished in the city and the university, including the Oxford University Jewish Society was founded then, Oxford Zionist Society, 1939, Oxford Women's Zionist Society, Theodor Herzl Society, Federation of Women Zionists, FWZ, Jewish National Fund, JNF, the Jaffa Club, which served during the war as rallying point for German Jewish women and girls, and Jewish youth clubs and Jewish religious unions. The local branch of the Federation of Jewish Zionists merged with Oxford Zionist Society. It was a flourishing time of Jewish life. A Jewish choir was formed in 1940, and knitting parties, and so on and so on. The increase in the presence of Jews to Oxford during the Second World War, leading to the Second World War, led to an increase in anti-Semitism. This occurred most conspicuously surrounding the circumstances relating to obtaining kosher meat and its distribution. There was a crisis in the Jewish community about this kosher meat, finding kosher meat in Oxford. In 1941, the Oxford community was thought to number 5,000 people and was assured of a supply of kosher meat. Thanks to the Jewish Chronicle for the publicity, one of Oxford's leading non-Jewish butchers, MRA Buttersfield, had arranged for official consent for shachtim, ritual slaughters, to slaughter at the Oxford City Abattoir. Around 1,000 registered, and a figure more or less maintained throughout the war saw part of the market, the covered market portioned off, as a kosher meat shop with Jewish supervision. About 150 fowls were sold every week. By May, due to difficulty to obtaining live fowls, the figure had reduced by more than half. In 1941, it was reported good relations with town hall authorities, but in 1941, in October, it was reported by a letter from Oxford evacuees, there were queues for kosher meat, but it was under control. A letter from another customer says the scene at the kosher butchers are causing anti-Semitism, October of 1941. Obviously, it continued. It has been difficult for a community of 30 souls to be swollen suddenly to 2,000. In October 24th, 1941, once again, a letter from Joseph Hirsch reported that as a member of the Oxford Jewish congregation, he wrote to the committee on July 28th, pointing out the unsatisfactory state of meat distribution. The letter was not acknowledged. He writes, some people are buying treifa meat, non-kosher meat, because of the difficulty of buying kosher meat and the chaos. In Jews of Oxford on the subject, in the book, it writes, there were public relations problems gradually solved in the large Jewish queues and the narrow alleys of the covered market. And the customers themselves complained that the shop was not kept clean enough, and fowls were killed in the shop in the presence of women and children, framed as a public relations problems, ills in the local press, there was anti-Jewish sentiments. And the history goes on. where we have reports of seeing Jews as a problem with the influx of refugees. And the anti-Semitism conference was set up in July 1943, held at Oxford Union Society's Hall on a Saturday. 40 delegates represented trade unions and other organizations, though no Jewish organization were invited to discuss the issue of anti-Semitism. Moving towards my time in Oxford, since 2001, arriving in Oxford in 2001, the issue of anti-Semitism in Oxford has risen directly affecting Jewish students and faculty at the university. The campaign to boycott Israeli academics in 2003, initiated by Hillary and Stephen Rose in 2002, and Sue Blackwell in 2005. These efforts affected Israeli students and Jewish students, particularly Andrew Wilkie in 2003, barring Israeli students from studying in his research group. A further effort was made in 2013 for the university to pass a BDS motion. Oxford Junior Common Room all had to support a motion for ALZU, the student union's name, to be included in the national motion to support the boycott and divestment sanctions. But with Elon Levy and his fellow Jewish students, rallied the common rooms and defeated that motion overwhelmingly. A further motion was in 2000, and this followed 2007. The motion was brought, also defeated. In 2016, we have what leads to today's situation in Oxford at the university, where the Labour Club, anti-Semitism broke out in the Labour Club when a student revealed that it was common for Jewish students to be referred to as Zios, and the club voted to endorse Israel Apartheid Week. This led to the resignation of Alex Chalmers and led to the investigation into anti-Semitism in the Labour Party across England, which had enormous impact until today, arising to the adoption of the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, which includes many examples, and adopted by the university and the UK government and many others, of course. Comes October the 7th, and one can see a line drawn from 2016 to October the 7th, where you have a huge outbreak of anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism, where Jewish students were completely traumatized by many of their relatives. Some of the students had their relatives murdered or taken hostage, and some had no home to return to in Israel, displaced by the war. The response of the university was non-discriminatory. We addressed all who may be involved in the conflict, not recognizing the immediate concern of the Jewish students. Displays for the release of the hostages were vandalized. One Jewish student was told the anti-Semitic views of Hamas is a consequence of the Jews, and so on. 2 Israeli faculty members were confronted by students, accusing them of being Nazis, child murderers. Jews control the American government, Jews control the banks. The overlap between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism was a very short space. One student was told, well, Oxford is not a nice place for Israelis and Jews, nothing can be done about it. Another student was advised to leave Oxford. This climate of hate caused many Jewish and Israeli students to hide their identity out of fear of being targeted. Others stopped attending classes, college, libraries. Some rusticated for 2 terms, feeling unsafe and welcome, and some decided to thought about terminating. The public discourse was equally tragic, and in lectures and debates, there was valorization of the 7th of October attacks as legitimate forms of violence. A professor called it a strong message by Hamas. One remarked Oxford 7th was justified and understood where it was coming from. Students denied sexual violence occurred on the 7th of October, claimed Israel planned the massacre, pretense to occupy Gaza. Shocking. A speaker at the Oxford Department of International Development who we know well, said there's no such thing as anti-Semitism today, and if you are accused of being anti-Semitic, ignore them. That happened the 15th of November 23. Another said anti-Semitism was being weaponized as a Zionist plot. During the summer term 2024, encampments were set up for 2 months on the university grounds by the Oxford Action for Palestine, first outside the Museum of Natural History on the 6th of May, and a second on the 19th of May outside the Radcliffe Camera, opposite the Bodleian Library. A list of demands displayed for the university to agree to included a complete boycott of Israel. The university allowed these encampments by their judgment to remain until the 27th of June, when they received notice to disband by 7th of July. Complaints by Jewish students were dismissed, as none of these incidences, 100 of instances gathered in a dossier, was delivered to the university, and the response was none of these rise to the level of anti-Semitism. The reason being that the university adopted in 2016 the IHRA definition for anti-Semitism, but they also accepted the Home Office Affairs 2 caveats, that you also need intent of anti-Semitism, not just denying the Jewish people their right to self-determination by claiming that the existence of a state of Israel is a racist endeavor, and applying double standards. These are examples of the IHRA, but they also included the 2 caveats, that you need to have intent of actual anti-Semitism. It's not anti-Semitic to hold the Israeli government to the same standards or to take particular interest in the Israeli government's policies and actions without additional evidence to suggest anti-Semitic intent, leaving the Jewish students abandoned to all their experiences, that none of it rises to the level of anti-Semitism. So, this long history of anti-Semitism in Oxford reflects a history of anti-Semitism in the world we live in for the past 2 millennia. Tisha B'Av is a time for reflection and search for meaning. Leon Poliakov writes in his foreword to the history of anti-Semitism, there are 2 hypotheses on the origin of modern anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism that arises out of Christendom, you probably discussed this in great length this conference, and the spiritual explanation. By virtue of the mysterious design of providence, the Jews having been assigned a special role among the nations, playing it first among the so-called Noahide peoples, those practicing religion that derives from the Hebrew Bible. This is reflected in an interpretation of the statement in the Talmud, which becomes associated with Tisha B'Av, which we mark the dispersion and the tragedies of the Jewish people. Yes, there's been tragedies and dispersion and exclusion and expulsions, but the Talmud says in Psachim 87b, reflecting Leon Poliakov's statement, the second hypothesis, God performed a charitable deed toward Israel in that he scattered them among the nations. What should be the response to this phenomenon and how to find meaning and purpose within it? So just for a few minutes, approaches to the subject of this talk. 2 approaches to anti-Semitism have been assimilation and enclave. These responses may mitigate friction, but does not deal with the issue, inability for society to embrace the other. A third approach, which we'd like to discuss today in the context of this talk, is to be steadfast in one's identity and focus on education of society. This latter approach is found in the work of the Rabbi Menachem Eloshnissen, the Rabbi who passed away in 1994, who saw the Russian Revolution on his doorstep in Ukraine in 1917, witnessed the rise of Nazi Germany in 1933, the invasion of Paris in 1940. He fled to Vichy, Lisbon, arriving in America in 1941. His father died out of ill health in forced exile in the Soviet Union, in exile. His life's work was to rebuild Jewish life worldwide after the Holocaust. The strengthening of Jewish identity as a response to anti-Semitism can be found in 2 correspondences. In 1969, opposing the flight of the Jewish community from a neighborhood in Brooklyn when faced with challenges, the Rebbe wrote, "Should a Jew feel so insecure in the presence of a non-Jew and have an inferiority complex that he should flee a neighborhood?" In 1970, regarding the struggle for Soviet Jewry, he similarly wrote, "The antidote is the strengthening of the principle that Jews are responsible for one another in a positive way, every extra effort in observing Judaism on behalf of our unfortunate brethren in the Soviet Union who are not free to observe will directly benefit them in precisely the same way as any benefit to one part of the body benefits the whole body, strengthening the entire corpus of the Jewish people. Here's the right response. In 1977, to a Ukrainian Jewish socialist, he wrote, "Since we cannot rely on the kindness of nations, it is vitally necessary that Jews everywhere should turn their hearts and minds inwardly and strengthen their identification with our great historic spiritual heritage." In December 1980, the Rabbi argued that education about belief in God as part of the 7 Noahide laws can also serve to combat anti-Semitism and prevent another Holocaust. So he moved from the inward, steadfast strengthening of Jewish identity as one response to, in 1980, in his public talks, about the crucial importance of education in society and education of belief in God and the Noahide principles. The rationale is, he argued, as German philosopher Karl Lowith, student of Heidegger, argued 20th century philosophy viewed itself as a secular break with theology, but in fact retained the religious idea that history is moving towards a messianic concept of perfection. He calls this the secularization of history led to the horrors of the Holocaust. The Rebbe argued that accordingly, restoring Western civilization on a theological foundation can prevent further tragedies to occur. In April 1983, and the Passover, he argued once more for education of society to believe in God and uphold the Noahide moral principles, charity, oppose theft, murder. These basic moral principles is crucial to prevent another Holocaust. So the fast of the 9th of Av marks the time of the destruction of the 2 Jerusalem temples and the onset of the tragedy of exile, giving rise to anti-Semitism for 2 millennia. There are 2 ideas which run through this day: tragedy of destruction, but also transformation. It is the latter we'll explore for a few moments, which imbues the concept of the history of exile with meaning and purpose. In Oxford, there was a professor, Isaiah Berlin. His ancestor was the 3rd Rabbi, Chabad Rabbi, Rabbi Menachem Mendel of Lubavitch, known as the Tzemach Tzedek, passed away in 1866. In his commentary to Lamentations, which is the book we read on Tisha B'Av, the Eicha book, written by Jeremiah, according to tradition, he offers a dual interpretation, how a verse refers to tragedy, but also how it's transformed into a blessing for the future and transformation of the Jewish people in Jewish history. And just one example, I can give many. In Lamentations, it states in verse 1, "Alas, lonely sits the city once great with people. She that was great among nations is become like a widow. The princess among states is become a thrall." This is the opening of the book of Lamentations, the course of destruction and the exile of the Jews after the destruction of Jerusalem. One can find a deeper meaning, he argued, in this verse with a positive, meaningful interpretation, not just reflecting on tragedy. Where it says, in the book of Leviticus, of course, you have the idea of alone, the loneliness of exile, where it opens up in the book of Lamentations, lonely sits the city once great with people. In Hebrew, badad, echa yashva badad. But the word alone, yes, there's a history of exclusion and persecution, which causes aloneness. But on the other side of it, Rabbi Menachem Mendel, who passed away in 1866, in his commentary on Lamentations, interprets the verse in the form of a transformation into a blessing. As it states in Deuteronomy 23:6, "But your God, your Lord, refused to heed Balaam. Instead, your God turned the curse into a blessing." So where you find a curse, you can find a blessing. And we find this in also Lamentation 3:28, where it says, "He sits alone in meditative stillness. Indeed, he receives reward for it." Rashi explains in the context of tragedy that we are waiting for the decree of loneliness. The sages, however, derived from this verse, even the one who sits and studies Torah, the Holy One, blessed be he, fixes his reward. As it says in Lamentations, though he sits alone and meditates in stillness, yet he takes a reward unto himself. There's a power of connection one has with God which comes with aloneness, an intimate and powerful bond which is transformed by this concept. This is also mentioned in the great work of Ethics of the Fathers, citing this verse from Lamentations. And numerous other verses where we have Judah has gone into exile because of misery and harsh oppression. When she settled among the nations, she found no rest. All her pursuers overtook her in the narrow places. Found no rest refers to Ein La Menachem. There's also no comfort. Ein La, no comfort, can be understood as comfort given by Ein, which means not, but also has a Hebrew word configuration of Ani, I. God does give comfort to the Jewish people in exile. And the journey of the Jewish people through history is seen in the light of a text at the end of the book of Numbers, where the concept behind this dual interpretation is the theology, the history in Jewish thought is not a cyclical history, but linear. There are many social history theories. I'm sure there's some sociologists here. Alexander Delafoux, who developed the mathematical model of social cycles. You have Machiavelli, of course. You have George Medelsky, wrote Long Cycles in World Politics in 1987. The concept that everything's inevitable and there are cycles, whether it's 1700-year cycles of empires and governments and so on and so on. Yeah, 2 minutes. But in the Jewish idea, there's Jewish history is history of the world is linear, where we have the 42 journeys of the Jews from Egypt to the land of Israel in the book of Numbers. There's a starting point and an end point, where the Jews arrive at the Jordan River. Meanwhile, they traveled through a wasteland, a desert. This is a Jewish history of exile, persecution. The Midrash has a fascinating insight, which we'll conclude with a parable from the Tanchuma. Rabbi Tanchuma explained a parable. It may be compared to the case of a king whose son was not well, and whom he took to a distant place to cure him. When they returned home, the father began to enumerate all the stages, saying to him, here we slept, here we caught a cold, here you had the headache. The comparison is the king is God, and the son is those who are suffering, the Jewish people in the exile. The child is unwell, humanity is not well. We're going on a journey to a spa town for healing. As human beings are imperfect, need healing. There are events, sufferings that happen on the way, sleeping cold, headaches. This refers to the 3 stops out of Egypt, but also refers to the history of the Jewish people. The journey is on the way in this journey of exile. When they returned home, the closing of this metaphor is, when they returned, the father began to enumerate all the stages. But in the metaphor, there is no return, because they go into a spa town and then they find healing. There's no going back to the one's former, in the history of the Jewish people, there's no going back. We're on one journey, a linear history to a Jewish tradition of redemption. The going back in the insight of the commentaries is not going back in a physical sense, but in a contemplative sense. We are reflecting backwards in our history. Where we can look back now in the 21st century, we can look back at 2,000 years, but much more years from the beginning of our journey out of Egypt, but other exiles also. And we can see this is a journey, not a random journey of just tragedy, but the king is taking the son to a spa, to a healing. And healing, there's a meaning for the journey. One is going to a place to find healing, and the healing is motivated by kindness, to take the person and on the journey through the 42 journeys, but the many years of history, with a purpose and a meaning, to find a destination, which the end of the journey is freedom, healing, meaning, and we pray also for redemption. Thank you.
Presentations and insights and wisdom. So who has a question? Professor Bilal.
Thank you so much.
I was teaching a course Sunday at 8 o'clock, correct?
On Sunday? Yes, we are 5 people from here,
Wonderful.
giving a talk on Sunday at Ellie's center called Slaga. I think it's, I'll be the first, then it will be David Patterson, then it will be Meng, then Brackman, and also somebody called Eliani. Is there Eliani? My question is a specific question to you, Rabbi Brackman. I remember when I was a DPhil student, there was another one, and it was just before your time. And the other one was a guy with a hat, like a religious hat. So he was ultra-Orthodox, Jewish, DPhil student. And I was there when they prepared the Sheldonian Theater for the ceremony. It was around 2000, a year before you came. And I heard that somebody went to him and said, excuse me, you need to move to the very back of the Sheldonian because we cannot have you with that hat in the middle of the DPhil student parade. Bruce, his name was Bob, and he came, we were very shocked, and he came to me and we kind of made a complaint, etc. I don't remember what happened at the end, but they were very upset to see a Jew, kind of visibly Jewish, in this ceremony. My question to you, this was 5 years ago, my question to you is what is the situation today? I mean, I saw some kafirs that they were allowed, but I just wonder whether you know some ultra-Orthodox Jews at the DPhil ceremony.
That's a shocking story, and I can't believe it would happen today. British people are normally much more genteel than that. To be so overtly anti-Semitic. Largely, Oxford is a very dignified, respectful, and it's not acceptable to be anti-Semitic in that kind of overt way, even today in Oxford. And blurring the lines between anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism is the biggest challenge today. But actually, wearing a yarmulke on the streets of Oxford, Jewish students, there's been a flourishing of Jewish life here. Religious students, more religious Jewish students attending university, and walking openly as Jewish. When students will ask me, should I wear a yarmulke, I will say, there's nothing to worry about. It's a safe city. You may get some free Palestine, but that's the problem, as I mentioned earlier, about the blurring of the lines. But actually being Jewish overtly, there is no issue today in Oxford.
I have just a quick comment for Rabbi Kish's presentation. I have this recurring dream/nightmare for as long as I can remember that I'm so upset, and it's with people I love. It's always with like relatives or close friends. I'm so upset, and I'm yelling at them about something, and they're not paying attention. And in watching your presentation, I feel the really the pain in this story, and I want you to know that I listened and I heard you, and I didn't know, of course, about the Ethiopian Jews until everybody else found out, I guess, and I really haven't paid enough attention to the rest of the Jews in Africa. And I was aware of Rudy Rockman coming and doing this documentary, but I think it's really important that you're here and that you're bringing attention to this, and so I appreciate it, and thank you.
Just a quick question for Rabbi Kish, and thank you very much, both of you, for your presentations. You touched on Biafra. And to a large extent, the history that we always come to know Biafra about was almost a political war. But I was just wondering to what extent Judaic values actually influence. It seems like a very Jewish story in many ways. You didn't win, but it seems like a very Jewish story. The creation of Biafra by the Hebrews who were persecuted and slaughtered. And I was just wondering, we've never really seen the extent to which Judaism played a role in the fight against or the fight for secession from Nigeria. I was just wondering whether it ever did, or whether it was purely a political fight.
That's a
Okay, thank you very much. Biafra is an ideology when an Israelist talks about Zionism, and you want to know to what extent did Zionism fuel the anti-Semitic trope in Israel. That is like what you're asking me now, to what extent, because Zionism is like Biafra to an Igbo man. It's statehood. So if you can't remove Zionism from Israel, likewise, it can't remove Biafra from an Igbo man. So the Nigerian government, anything we do, they see us in that eye that these people, because the economy of Nigeria is powered by the Igbos. In the Biafran War, in the 3 years they fought the Biafran War, the Igbos were in the bush and built refineries in the bush that they used to power their machine of war. The Igbos, during the Biafran War, converted commercial jetliners to bombers. The Igbos converted motor vehicles to armored cars. One of the reasons the British people doubled down their support for Nigeria was during when the war was about starting, Prince Charles came to Nigeria. When he came back to the British House of Commons, he told them, you people are calling the Biafra the rogue and tag military, that you don't know what they are doing, that how can people who you call refugees refine oil in the bush when a country like Nigeria cannot refine oil? So that if these people are not clamped down, that the Western world will not have where they export their product anymore, that they should be brought down. That's part of the reasons why the Western world made sure, they said they don't want another Japan in Africa. Imagine that. So it's a serious thing for us.
Also Biafra, better friends.
Yes, then the name, if you had looked well in the map I showed, you see Biafra there. It has been there. Biafra is where Biafra is people of the children of Ephraim. When they came, they called them Bnei Ephraim, Bait Ephraim, Bifraim, Biafra. That is where that name came from, Ephraim. Some rabbis came to Nigeria in 1995. They came with what they call is an advocacy group, King Solomon Sephardic Federation. A rabbi was analyzing this. I was younger then. I heard it from a rabbi that Ephraim was here. They know. And why are we acting like we don't know? Thank you.
Well, since I recently found out I'm 30% Nigerian, I'm feeling very Jewish right now. Why do you think that maybe there was orchestration, oversight, or exclusion of the Igbo Jews in Nigeria? Is it racism? Is it colorism? I mean, why do you think that people don't know?
Okay. When the state of Nigeria, when they got independence, Nigerian oil, the Western powers don't pay the money they should pay in taking the oil. So our belief, I may be wrong, but I know I'm not wrong, but let me just say it like that. The British government knew that the Igbos, you see, Kissinger told President Nixon that these people are westernized. He didn't say that about the other people in Nigeria. You see, that thing is a secret memo to the president of the United States in 1969, that these are the wandering Jews of West Africa. Westernized, civilized, smart. So the British government knows that if these people are in the top echelon of things, that they're not going to get the oil for free. So they made sure that we are schemed out so that they can have a field day. Thank you.
Final question.
Okay, so this is a question for Rabbi Kish. But given that Boko Haram is more of a homegrown jihadist movement, which has recently grown to be affiliated with ISIS, I wonder, and of course the fact that it's conspiratorial anti-Semitism is directed towards equals, I wonder what differences or similarities do you see with jihadist movements surrounding Israel, like Hamas?
You see, Nigeria is a very peculiar place. The Boko Haram guy doesn't believe that I am Jewish. That is why I'm safe. He believes I am Igbo. That nothing, because he cannot fathom it that this guy here in Nigeria he doesn't believe it. So who he thinks is very close to Israel is the Christians. You get it now? So that is why he goes to kill the Christians. He sees me as an indigenous people of Nigeria. So if each time I say we are Jewish, they laugh at us. They don't believe it. So Boko Haram, the only thing, Boko Haram was not operating in my territory. The only people who try to operate in my territory are the few people know they call the Fulanis from Mali, Futajalon Mountain. They believe that, what is this, their father's name again? I came from, I forgot his name, the first Fulani man that came to Nigeria in 1804. He came with jihad. He said that Nigeria will be homeland for the Fulanis. So ever since 1804, they've been carrying out jihad to exterminate all the indigenous people in Nigeria so that all the Fulanis in the whole Africa can take now. That is the only problem we'll have with them. They don't have a problem with me because they think I'm Jewish. They don't believe. They say, how can you be Jewish? They spite us. How can you be as smart as people in Israel? So in their mind, they don't think you're just... So if you remember when you came to our synagogue, did you see any sign that is Jewish? The synagogue, no. Is there any name, anything? So in the synagogue, you don't see anything. Only if you know, you know. If you don't know, you don't know. So what they do in our synagogue in Lagos, you know what they say? They believe we are doing voodoo. So some people will come and write on our wall, Church of Satan. So they're scared of us. So if I'm going in the street, if I dress, they see me, hi, how are you? How are you? They don't believe you are Jewish. So that is why we are still safe. So the Boko Haram is up there in the north. They are dealing with the Christians who they perceive are friends to Israel. Thank you.
So, on behalf of everybody here, for the two rabbis, thank you so much for your presentation. And your communal leadership, both of you, is very important. El Shaddai has some closing remarks before we go off on Shabbat. Please be quiet in this.